Hey Film Boss, welcome back to Film Feature 43. Today we're doing another 43 Facts video on the Harry Potter series, this time talking about the third film in the franchise, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. So, without further ado, let's get into talking about the facts. Chris Columbus decided to not return to direct the third movie in the franchise after directing the first two because he was afraid he was missing his kids growing up, even though they had cameos in all of his movies. So, director Alfonso Cuarón stepped in and got the role. Cuarón never read any of the books nor watched the first two movies, so it was his friend Guillermo del Toro who said, hey, don't be an idiot, read the books immediately. So he did. He wanted to get to know the three main cast members, so he tasked them with writing an essay about their characters and about themselves. In a true fashion to their characters, Emma Watson wrote 16 pages, Daniel Radcliffe wrote 1 page, and Rupert Grint never did the assignment. You could say that Cuarón had a different directing style than Chris Columbus, because in a scene where Daniel Radcliffe was having trouble not doing what Cuarón wanted him to, he went to him and told Radcliffe to just pretend like he was seeing Cameron Diaz in a G-string, and apparently that worked. Cuarón was also the person who came up with the idea of ice falling from the sky whenever the Dementors were around, but with his accent, there was miscommunication between him and the visual effects team. So instead of ice, they heard eyes, so they made a storyboard of Dementors showing up and eyeballs falling out of the sky, and that made Alfonso very confused and a little shocked. It took the visual effects team 6 months to come up with the look and movement of the Dementors, maybe because they were spending so much time making eyeballs fall out of the sky. But they started with CGI, they didn't like how it looked, so they went to general puppetry, they didn't like how that looked, so they even tried underwater in slow motion, and they did like how that looked, but it was too big of a task to continue to do it throughout the entire movie, so they went back to CGI. Sadly, also not returning was Richard Harris as Dumbledore. Ian McKellen was offered the role, but said that he already played one legend in his lifetime, i.e. Gandalf. 2 would be too much to ask for.
When he died, he played Dumbledore, of course, the wizard. I played the real wizard, but he was...
It also didn't help that while he was alive, Richard Harris said that Ian McKellen was
technically brilliant, but passionless.
Yeah.
So McKellen said that replacing him in that role would feel disrespectful to Harris.
I couldn't take over the part from an actor who I'd known didn't approve of me.
Richard Attenborough said that he wanted the role of Dumbledore, and that was the only movie role he would have come out of retirement for, but he wasn't given it. But funnily enough, he did replace Harris in the 1963 movie The Great Escape, so that's kind of ironic. Michael Gabon was ultimately our next Dumbledore, but he never read any of the books because he didn't need to, in his own words, because every character that he plays is just a variation of his own personality. Gabon didn't take very long to get into the fun on the set, though, because during the scene where all the kids are sleeping in one area, Daniel Radcliffe wanted to be close to a girl that he liked.
Has asked to have his sleeping bag next to this particular girl that he fancied.
But Gabon, Cuarón, and Alan Rickman had different plans by sticking a remote control whoopee cushion in Radcliffe's sleeping bag and kept setting it off to embarrass him.
You know, it's completely our own world, and we like to swim in the deepest waters and fly.
They had put a fart machine into my sleeping bag.
This hall echoes.
And Michael Gambon had actually been pressing it during the take, I found out.
And that wasn't the only practical joke that was played on set. Rupert Grint actually showed up to the first day of filming with his hair dyed bleach blonde, and Daniel Radcliffe just assumed that was because it was asked for in the movie, and it was just Rupert Grint playing a joke. Also new to the cast was Gary Oldman, and he knew how much Daniel Radcliffe loved music, so he showed up to set with a bass guitar as a gift to Daniel Radcliffe. Also, he took the role because he needed the money because he hadn't been in anything for over a year, and his son convinced him that this was the role that he needed to take. Sirius's tattoos that he has were inspired by Russian prison gang tattoos, and they're kind of a mark of a feared man. In the symbols underneath his wanted poster translate to more or less human, and whenever he first made it to set, Tom Felton didn't know who he was. He just assumed that he was the janitor for the set. Speaking of Tom Felton, in the scene where he's being slapped by Emma Watson, all the play slapping that they were doing didn't look real enough, so Tom Felton told her to just go ahead and hit me, not thinking that she would.
When I said slap me, I was like, movie slap me.
She hauled off and slapped him as hard as she could, which stunned him.
Which completely took me, I didn't know what to do, and I was just like, yeah, that was really good, that was great, and kind of walked off sheepish.
And she felt really bad for it later on, repeatedly apologizing, but it was a real shock to Felton.
I'm not really sure. I feel terrible. I feel really bad. I'm not really sure what I was thinking.
All of the pockets in Felton's robes had to be sewn shut because he kept sneaking food onto set. And speaking of sneaking food, all of the kids were told that the sweets and honeydukes were covered in lacquer so they wouldn't take them because sweets started disappearing in between takes, and that led to inconsistencies when they had to reshoot certain things. Speaking of honeydukes, it was originally Ollivander's wand shop, and then it was Floors and Blots before it was turned into honeydukes, so they just keep repurposing the same buildings. Other facts revolving around location: Azkaban is never seen in this movie, even though it was designed and sketched out. Those designs were used later on, though, in the Order of the Phoenix when you finally get to see Azkaban. And there were two separate night buses that were designed, one for interior and one for exterior shots. And for the exterior shots, it was just a regular London double-decker bus with an extra deck built on and colored blue. And how they got it to seem like it was zipping through traffic is the bus was driving at normal speed with the other cars driving slowly, and the film in the camera was ran through at a slower rate, which gave it the illusion of driving a lot faster than what it was. All the night bus scenes were filmed in Palmer's Green in north of London, and spectators were told that they could watch, but please do not take any flash photography because it will ruin the effect, and they did not listen. And also, somebody ignored the police and the do not enter signs and drove into oncoming traffic during the filming of that scene. And speaking of magical transportation, the train that's used as the Hogwarts Express was vandalized, which halted filming for several days. And more of a natural vandalization, the bats that we see around Hagrid's hut were real trained bats, and Daniel Radcliffe said that they urinated everywhere. And speaking of animal excrement, when we first meet Buckbeak the Hippogriff, who's completely computer-generated, we see him pooping, which is apparently the first time that a CG animal ever defecated on screen, which I guess is a pretty big deal, almost as big as the flushing toilet in Psycho. Sticking with animals, whenever Harry's looking for Peter Pettigrew on the Marauders map, and you see him running right towards him on the map, you can actually hear a rat scurrying past Harry. And likewise, whenever you're outside and the moon is full, you can hear Lupin howling at the moon. JK has actually said if she could meet any of her characters, Remus Lupin would probably be the one that she would pick. Speaking of characters introduced in this film, we're introduced to Professor Trelawney, who was played by Emma Thompson, but was offered to Tilda Swinton first, who grew up in a London boarding school, and she didn't take the role because she said that she doesn't like movies that romanticize such a lonely and isolated place. She may have dodged a bullet because the glasses that they used for Trelawney were just magnifying glasses that made Emma Thompson really dizzy and sick to her stomach. A character not in this movie much is Gregory Goyle, whose actor Josh Herdman fell and broke his arm right before production started, and not in the franchise as a whole is the second eldest Weasley sibling, Charlie Weasley, who can be seen for the only time in the entire franchise, played by Alex Crockford in the picture where the Weasleys are in Egypt. They were also going to recast Dudley Dursley because actor Harry Melling lost too much weight and looked too skinny, which was out of character, but they decided to keep him on and just put him in a fat suit. And this was the only movie where a professional illusionist was hired to create the illusions that we see on screen. Paul Kiev was hired to make the illusions look as real as possible, and there's bonus material on the DVD where viewers can try to pick out where the illusions are. This is the last movie in the franchise to have a score composed by John Williams, and it's the first movie to have a no one under 9 rating because it was created for this movie because it's too scary for kids under 6, but if they do it under 12, they miss most of the target demographic, so a new rating was created. And Warner Brothers, in order to crack down on piracy, sent movie theaters night vision goggles for their ushers to catch people trying to film the movie. It was also the last Harry Potter movie to be released on VHS, but the first one to be released in IMAX, and it was the lowest grossing mainline Harry Potter movie, making under $800 million, which is the only one to do so. But that's all the facts I have for Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Make sure you stick around or go back and watch my previous videos on the Harry Potter series and all the other facts videos. If there's something you want to see, let me know down below. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.